What's up everybody, Enrique here from Novation for another live stream, Beats and Bytes. Thank you guys for tuning in, really appreciate it. This time we're going to be talking about Peak. It's our 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer, and specifically on Peak, the 1.2 update that we have for Peak, which is out now. If you got a Peak, go on components and update your Peak. Super simple, super fast, adds a ton of features when it comes to what you can do with Peak and basically its full potential now. If you guys are new and you're not familiar with Peak or what it is, basically what Peak is a 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer. We have a digital kind of front end with the Oxford oscillators. Chris Huggett does a lot of our sound and synth design. He's ton of basically heritage, and he goes way back up into the Oscars and the Wasps synths and stuff. And he's designed these, and the reason he went with a digital FPGA-based oscillator instead of the typical analog is basically the idea behind Peak is he wanted the flexibility and expandability, I guess you can say, of analog wave shapes, but as well as wavetables and kind of basic linear FM. He was a little bored with analog, just doing the same kind of 4 wave shapes and maybe a couple wave folding things here and there, but he just wanted more playability and more tones and just to reach a new sonic level of a sound utilizing a synthesizer. But that doesn't mean we've completely ditched or got rid of the analog behind this, because after that it goes into an analog mixer, analog VCA, 3 analog overdrives, and on top of that the analog filter. And the filter itself is kind of like a beefed up Wasp filter, similarly used on like the base station and whatnot, as well as a lot of the older synths that we used to make. From there, you have a ton of modulation capabilities. Again, it's 8 voices. Each of the 8 voices is made up of 3 oscillators. There's a lot of normal knobs on here. And let's not forget there's also FPGA-based effects. They're not DSP-based, which is awesome. So you get a lot more like, basically a lot more of a clearer sound with this. And that goes with the Oxford oscillators as well. They're FPGA, not DSP or like a digital sample or anything like that, because those majority of the time are about 44 kilohertz and 96 kilohertz in some cases, but the FPGAs are 24 megahertz. So no aliasing, no weird stepping stuff, and all the controls are FPGA, as well as the amps, the amp envelope, the 2 mod envelopes, as well as the 2 LFOs, and the 2 new LFOs, which I'll talk about later, which are a part of the update. But yeah, you got an arpeggiator, you got glide, you have, again, 2 mod envelopes, an amp envelope, a bunch of normal stuff like oscillator 3 to the filter cutoff, pre-filter distortion, post-filter distortion, a 3rd distortion in the menu, Unison Modes. The arpeggiator has like 32 rhythms. The arpeggiator has swing, different types. The LFOs can be cycled just once or twice up to 127 times, or just infinite as an LFO normally would act. Animate buttons, which are great for performance tools. Just there's so much on the face of Peak without even having to dive into the menu, but if you really wanted to get deep down and dive into Peak itself, you totally can. For example, if we take a quick look at the effects section here, you can change like the way the effects are routed, delay into reverb into chorus, delay into chorus into reverb, or if I just wanted to go and change like my reverb pre-delay or the low pass damp or my reverb size or the mod rate. There's a lot of like normal stuff in here and more at the end of this effects menu, but again, I'll get into that later. But yeah, that's pretty much Peak in a nutshell. 8-voice hybrid synthesizer. Wavetable, linear FM, and analog wave shapes on the front end, followed by a lot of analog signal path, ran in parallel with digital effects at the end. That way you don't lose the analog warmth on the way out, but you get the flexibility and really nice tones of the effects. And yeah, modulation. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into some of the new updates. First and foremost, the biggest one for this is the wavetables. I'm going to go ahead and hit Initialize. And I have circuit here basically helping me run sounds into peak, as well as like I can do chords and stuff. So that's what's kind of off over here on the side, if you can kind of see it. Wavetables. We've added 43 new wavetables to peak on top of the ones that were already there. So we're over 50 wavetables in here. And the crazy thing to realize is that in each wavetable, you have 5 different positions in that wavetable that interpolate smoothly between each other. So you take that 50 plus, multiply that by 5, and that's basically all the different positions you can come up with within a wavetable. So let's take a listen to some of the new ones. This one's called Yeah. I'm gonna go down an octave. Same if I wanted to go to like this weird vocal one. Also, if it's a little low or anything like that in volume, let us know. We'll gladly turn it up. So again, these are all different different wave shapes that you can use, but the cool thing here is this knob, the shape amount knob, you have 3 different switches for it, right? Manual mode, which is basically the offset or the bias. I can say I want it to start here. How much does mod envelope go? So now that the bias is set using the manual, I can then take this and set it positively. And then I can go and shape up my mod envelope. See where I want it to land. Maybe there. Change the decay. Or maybe no decay. And then on top of that, so now that that's happening, I can go and tell the LFO to move from that end point of the mod envelope negatively or positively. So let's set it a little negative. Maybe turn it up. Maybe add a little bit of a fade time to it. Maybe try a chord on this. This might sound kind of crazy. Forgive me. So this wavetable is called V chord, I'm guessing for like a virtual type of chord. So playing a chord on a chord sometimes doesn't work out the best. But the cool thing here is we have that modulation now set. We can change the wavetable after that modulation has been set. So I can now browse around, maybe play Tokyo or Tides. That's actually pretty cool. And the cool thing here is that the Lfos they're not assigned to the voice specifically. So basically they can act as one giant LFO, or they can act as 8 independent LFOs per voice, which is really cool. So that's why you can hear some of them, the fade time's already empty, and basically it's going at its full depth amount to the shape, while the other ones are still working up to that point. And again, as far as the wavetables, there's a ton of with the wavetables, there's just a ton of different options for them. So again, let's listen to a couple more. You can change the bias up. Also, if you guys have any questions on any of the stuff that I'm talking about, whether it's a simple question or a complex question, by all means, leave them down in the comments. We'll have a Q&A at the end, or we can even answer some on the go. So yeah, any questions? No question is a bad question. Granular is kind of cool. And again, the crazy thing here is this is just one voice with one oscillator. I still have the other two oscillators to turn on in the mixer if I wanted to use them. So watch this. We have that sound, right? Let's give it a little bit of a pulse width on oscillator 2. Maybe change the octave of it. And the cool thing here, pulse width, of course, is going to have its pulse width modulation. But if I did something like a sine wave, the sine wave actually has wave positions as well, similar to the wavetable. So watch this. What you're hearing move is the sine wave. So if I turn down the wavetable that we have going on, this is just the sine wave by itself. Dead center, of course, is your typical sine wave. But the manual wave shape kind of acts as like a wave folder. Almost gets kind of vowel-y. So with the 43 new wavetables that have been added, they are assignable independently within the 3 oscillators. So each oscillator can be on its own wavetable, having its own modulation capabilities, and just a ton of movement that you can create holding down a single note, especially if you've got 3 oscillators tuned differently. Or you can just play it polyphonically because, of course, you have the 8 voices, which will react to any keys, polyphonic aftertouch as well, which is really cool with Peak. And after all that, speaking of modulation, we have a newly designed mod matrix with some new, basically destinations and new sources for your modulation capabilities. And this is probably one of my favorite things. The old mod matrix wasn't designed the best. This now is awesome because you have quick access to all 16 mod slots. So just by pressing the page buttons, you're going through the different mod slots. Each source, you can have 2 different sources for your modulation, and then a destination. So each destination can have 2 different sources, and then of course you have your depth. This again is super simple to use, really awesome. For example, pitch. Let's say, let's set up this wavetable, kind of cool. E piano, LFO. If I turn the filter down, that's kind of cool. But let's have something move the filter for us. So what's our destination? I can easily set it to the filter frequency. This is the way that I like to set up my modulation. Basically, I'll leave the 2 sources set to direct, which means it's going to directly affect my destination by however much I set in the depth. And this is pretty handy because I can then say I want my depth, or I want my modulation to end where? Maybe I want my modulation to end right there, plus 30. Now I can go and change what the source is going to be. Let's set it to animate 1. The cool thing with having 2 sources, I can also set a new, basically when I set 2 sources to one mod slot, this is where it gets kind of deep. When I set 2 sources in one mod slot, and one of those sources is one of the animate buttons, the animate button is going to act as a gate. So in this case, LFO2 will not affect the filter cutoff until I press the animate button. Let's turn that up a little bit, the rate. Hold. And I can just turn that off. So now again, until I press that, if I let it go, it's gone. And the cool thing here is what I was mentioning earlier about the 2 LFOs. If I keep scrolling in the mod matrix, we have a couple new mod sources. So after the animate buttons and the CV, we have LFO3, positive and negative, or just positive, LFO4, positive and negative, as well as the pitch bend wheel, positive, negative. So these are awesome. You have 2 additional LFOs in here, of course, that you don't have direct control on the face of the unit, but you do within the menu. So you have 4 total LFOs, which is pretty gnarly. And again, those LFOs, if we go and take a look at them, can do a lot of weird stuff. You of course have the wave shape of the LFO, which mirror the 4 that you have here, their rate, their sync rate if you want them to be synced. And then the cool thing is that the LFO 1 and 2, which are on the face of the unit, have those modes where they can act as one giant LFO or an LFO per voice, and you can also change how many times they repeat. And on top of that, again within the mod matrix, is you have a newly added 4 slot, on top of the 16 slot mod matrix that you already have, another 4 slots for just the effects, which is kind of crazy. So if I hit effects and I go page over, you can see here in the top right corner, it lets us know what page we're on. Page 8 out of 9. If I go to 9 out of 9, we're now in the mod slot matrix, or in the effects slot mod matrix for the effects. So again, what's my destination going to be? It's going to be my reverb level, and I'm going to leave it direct and set it. Right, and now I can set what the source is going to be. So let's say animate 2. This will be kind of cool. The cool thing with the animate buttons is you also have a hold feature. Maybe turn up some chorus. Give myself a little bit of attack and some release. Let's get really weird, throw some glide time on here. Hear it coming back. Goes away, new chord. I could be on this all day. Where was I? Okay, yeah, effects, mod matrix, 4 slots in the mod matrix, 2 new LFOs that are unvoiced, of course. 16 slots, so you got 20 slots of mod matrix stuff that you can do on peak, and again a ton of stuff within the unit itself. And another cool thing with this is the feature that we've added to the envelopes. So if I hit the envelope button, we can go over here and we can see some more options that we have for our envelopes, basically our repeats. We can now have the envelopes repeat infinitely on their own, and this is both for, or I guess for all of the envelopes, which is the amp envelope, the mod envelope, as well as the second mod envelope can have a repeat amount. And this is awesome because if I can go and turn off this, right, I press it, that's it, just once. You hear it open, and then it's done. But if I go to my amp envelope and I say repeats, I can have it repeat twice. So it's technically 3 because it's once and then repeats twice. So if I just wanted to go bump bump, hold time, which is basically a dedicated how long the envelope will stay held. I believe it goes up to a total of 500 milliseconds. Yeah, it's about half a second. And the repeats is going to repeat between the attack and the decay portion of the envelope. So you can hear how I can set my sustain to here, but it's going to peak over that because it's just moving over the attack and the decay. Almost sounds like a delay, but there's no delay on here. But if I threw a delay on here, and again, that's the stuff that you can do with the amp envelope, which is just the newly added hold time as well as the repeats. You have the 2 additional LFOs, which also have, or the original LFOs have the repeat time as well, which is really cool. And yeah, I mean, Peak itself has a ton of stuff. On top of all that, we've added like the Initialized manual mode, which is kind of cool. So in the settings, basically when you go to initialize the patch, you can set it to be live or set it to be initialized. So usually when you hit initialize, it's going to set everything to a default value of basically 0. Filter is going to be fully open. But what the initialize live setting does is it's going to take my patch and I'm going to hit initialize, and it's going to set everything to what the knobs are set on the unit. It's a kind of a fun way to create a random patch, if you will. So kind of want to see what this sounds like. All right, pretty different from what we had. Cool. Yeah, that sounds actually kind of nice. Turn the filter down. Hear a little bit of unison. Here's some spread. Oh yeah, the noise is up a little. That's cool. It's kind of fun to kind of see, like, set up a random patch and try to figure out what it is to break it back down. There's also micro tuning that we've added. Again, in the settings, after we get past 10, we have our tuning tables. And here you can do it manually or you can do it in components online, which is a lot easier. There's a lot of pre-created tuning tables that you can just send to Peak. You have a total of 16 tuning tables that you can have. Again, basically when I play this keyboard note, what is it going to play on Peak? And you can kind of go and change it up here within the unit itself. But again, it's a little easier and quicker to go with the ones, unless you know specifically what kind of tuning table you want on Peak. It's a fun way to kind of just mess around and come up with some weird stuff that you normally wouldn't. With all that, we have the two more added Lfos, which I've said like 1,000 times already. The new effects mod matrix, the pitch bend also is a cool one to use as a modulation source. The new mod matrix design, my favorite thing for sure. And then the envelope features, the initialized manual mode, and a lot of the micro tuning. Again, this update is free, and we constantly try and update our products. Please let us know what you guys would love to have in a Peak. And if you have one already, what makes it great and what would make it even better, because we're always listening. You guys help us out so much in making the products that we make. We honestly just listen to you guys. But as far as that, maybe let's do some Q&A and get to that. Got a little pamphlet here. Let's see. Can make an acid sound. Yeah. Can Peak make an acid sound? Like, what is that? Oh, like high frequency? Oh, cool. Yeah, totally. That's awesome. Let's do this. Basically, oh, let me change that initialized setting. Honestly, a lot of stuff can kind of do a semi-acid sound. What the acid sound really comes from is the sequencer, which is the 303, which I don't have here, or like an Avalon or anything like that, the old Roland one. But initialize a patch. We'll just do pulse width. Basically, all it's going to take is a little bit of resonance, and then the amp envelope. Maybe throw in a little sequence. Let's see if I can do something on the fly. Make a fool of myself. Oh, that's loud. So I'll say record. So right now, I can go and set it to not poly, but to mono. And again, this is kind of just fine-tuning it to whatever you need it to do. The resonance will like hit that self-oscillating point, so I do not want to blow anybody's eardrums, especially mine. But that's kind of one of the things you could do with Peak. Of course, that's just with a single oscillator, and it can fully expand from that point on. The next question is, were you using any external effects? No, none. I wish there was an effects box that was just Peak's effects. These effects are crazy, really crazy. Bear with me. I want to do one thing that I love doing on Peak, and that's sending the delay into the reverb into the chorus on a very simple sound. This is initialized patch, right? So we'll turn up the delay, which is going already. Turn the feedback all the way up. It's just going to go. Turn up the reverb. And then the chorus. And that's it. Done. I'm not even playing anything anymore. Turn down the filter and bring in some notes. that was like an initialized patch 2 seconds ago. The effects on peak are crazy. They're basically on their own entire thing because we wanted them to sound as good as possible. Next question. Sorry about that. Can you tell us about peak updates, like future ones? No, I cannot. I wish I could, but this is 1.2. I'm excited for what 1.3 may bring. Yeah, I mean, again, let us know what you guys want, what you guys want to hear. We have the synth owners group, we have the circuit owners group on Facebook, even in the comments down on the YouTube. Let us know, because we're always listening. Seriously, we get a lot of ideas from what our customers are saying and what the people that we partner with are saying. Next question after that, is there a way to get drift on the oscillators? Yes, awesome question, completely forgot about it. Again, initialized patch, let me build a chord real quick. Cool, turn that down. So in the oscillator menu, if I go to the front page, there's a drift and a divergence. Divergence is basically each voice is kind of detuned a little bit, but statically. Drift is the amount of the oscillators constantly moving, as if you have PSU problems, like your power is a little off and it's kind of moving things around. So we have this sound here. Turn up our drift. Here it's already moving. Even more. Throw a little reverb on there. It just gives it that like little bit of uneasiness, builds a little tension. And then if you turn up the divergence on top of that, you can hear it's even more off. The cool thing with drift is you have basically 3 ways of introducing this oscillator detuning. You have the drift, the divergence, which is for the oscillators. If I go into the voice section, we also have filter divergence, which means each voice running through its filter signal path will have the filter tuned a little differently than the last one, which is another awesome way to kind of add some movement there. Any multi-timbral in the works? No, for peak, well, not that I know of. It's 8 voices, it's unitimbral or monotimbral. It just plays 1 patch at a time. You could do some weird, trippy stuff. I know Loop Pop has a video of doing some crazy stuff with other synths, and I think he has one on Peak. He has a really good video up on it. So definitely check out his stuff. He does talk about a lot of cool like hacks and stuff for synths. I get a lot of inspiration from him. After that, examples of what can be done with CV mod input. I wish I had something here that has the CV output, but a quick example is it's a source in the mod matrix, CV positive and negative. And its destination can be any of these things, which is ton. You can say noise to filter, how much FM is going to the oscillators as well, which is cool. The mod envelope, the amp envelope, like release, attack time. You can do filter resonance, filter frequency. I mean, a ton of stuff. The ring level, noise level, all the pitch stuff. It's a bunch of stuff. Anything in the mod matrix that can be assigned can be basically receive its signal modulation from the CV input. So, and you can sequence this with a bunch of other, well, you can't sequence the notes, but you can send sequencer data into it to do a bunch of weird stuff to like the filter and whatnot. Last but not least, is there a way to set the unit to power up on the last selected patch? That's a good question. That's a really good question. And that might be something I'm gonna have to jot down and send over to the team, because that I don't know of, but it does by default start on the first patch. Oh, you know, well, no, it doesn't. There's this weird thing that it does where if you save it, I've had a patch save that it always starts up on like patch 10, but that's not exactly what you're asking. So what you're asking would be a great feature, and we'll definitely look into something like that. And here we go, another question. Any way to switch tuning tables on the fly, maybe with a MIDI controller? That's a bit of a tougher one. I'm not really sure about that, because I do know that in your settings at the very end that I was talking about, you have 16 tuning tables that you can flip between on the fly, right? But those tuning tables, you'd have to set them beforehand, and you can totally do that and save them here on the unit, or do it in components and launch them onto the unit itself. but you would have to change them using this here. I'm not sure if you can actually set that to like a CC number to change its tuning tables. And if you wanted to do it fully on the fly, it'd be kind of a pain because you'd have to do it here. And if we go and look here, you can basically say when I hit this note, that note pops up here. But what note is it going to be retuned to? And then from there, you would kind of have to go and then set that up and save it. So it'd be kind of a pain, but when you press a note on an external MIDI controller, the note that pops up here will be selected. And any keyboard split in the future. This is, it's a tough question to answer that one, but we should wrap it up there. And yeah, so with all that aside, again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. My name is Enrique here at Novation. Thank you guys so much. Leave any questions, comments, even after the live stream is done. If you're watching this in the future, let us know because we'd love to answer them and look at them as well. So until next time, I'll catch you all soon. Peace. Let's hit it.